Hi, Ankita. I am super excited to host you on another episode of peercheque Shorts. Thank you so much for taking the time out to have this conversation with me. So, from my experience of meeting so many early stage founders and startups, realize that they end up spending a lot of the time thinking about incentive plans, especially ESOPs, and end up figuring out an ideal structure that they'll be using for hiring multiple candidates across multiple stages. But before we get into that and discuss the topic at length, it'll be great if you could introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your journey as well.
Would love to. So Shivam, I'm one of co-founders at Infinite Club. My other co-founder is Joylita. So what Infinite Club is here to do is we're here to create the millionaires. And what
Mhm.
does that mean really? The thesis that we have is that if you look 10 years into the future, there is absolutely no doubt in anybody's mind that the tech startup ecosystem in India is going to create more millionaires than any other industry put together multiple times over. And why is that? That is because to the future millionaires are operators in these early stage companies today, and they all hold ESOPs in these companies. So we're thoroughly convinced that the future of the country is going to be the paradigm shaping companies that are being built today, and the operators are going to be the future millionaires. And we are here to enable these very companies to create liquidity around these ESOPs for these early stage employees who hold ESOPs today. So that's what Infinite Club core vision and mission is, to help founders create liquidity for their team members around ESOPs. So that's a little bit about Infinite, but yeah, I think I think your question was around ESOPs, right?
Yeah, so maybe firstly, thanks a lot for the introduction. I think you set a very good context about the topic in itself, especially with whatever Infinite Club is doing. Maybe it'll be great if you could
Right.
talk about ESOPs in general, right? Why should founders firstly offer ESOPs or a certain percentage holding in their company, and why should candidates actively ask for it?
Got it. I'll answer the latter part of the question first, where you said why should people ask for ESOPs, or should people ask for ESOPs when they are joining any company. Um, this I will actually ask you a question. How many people do you think in the world became wealthy because of earning a good salary?
I
It's a
think it's very
rhetorical
limited,
question.
right?
The
So
answer
you
is
can never be wealthy. Yeah.
yeah, it's a grand total of zero, right? I think nobody, and absolutely nobody in the world has really made money or become wealthy on a salary. You will never become wealthy just renting your time. Uh, the only short way to become truly wealthy is to have ownership in businesses now, or owning assets, or owning businesses. Now, being an entrepreneur is not for everybody, but thankfully, in today's modern context, while working for companies, you have the opportunity of owning a piece of the company. So therefore, it allows you to participate in the upside of the company that you are building, and not just renting your time. So I think for people who truly, interested in creating long-term wealth, I think ownership in businesses is an absolute must. So therefore, it's absolutely, absolutely. If you want to really have, not a linear outcome in life, but you want to have truly exponential outcome, or you want to have, a large outcome, you have to own pieces of businesses. Whether it's via investing in the stock markets, or it's owning ESOPs in companies that you work for, you have to own pieces of businesses. Now, to the former part of your question, that why should founders, or why should business owners share ownership in their business with their employees? I think no company or no large company is built on the backs of one individual, right? Every visionary founder or every super entrepreneur needs their army of general and functional experts around them to build a truly large outcome, right? Now, brilliant people, by and large, would be highly ambitious people, and um, in order to compensate and therefore get the most brilliant folks onto your mission, you have to share, wealth creation opportunities with them. You have to create large. You have to be able to create or help them visualize large outcomes for themselves. And therefore, to align the long-term incentive of such individuals, you have to share ownership in your company. So I think that's why business owners should share ESOPs with their prospective and current employees.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense as well, right? Like, firstly, from a candidate standpoint, you can never become wealthy. Like, you can always be rich, but then that wealth creation always happens when you're holding a certain
Absolutely.
percentage of a company that's going to become like $1 million outcome. And from, like, again, a founder's perspective, again, it makes a lot of sense considering the fact that you're not just hiring employees, but you're hiring people who are a part of your company who actually wants it to succeed because they'll have an outcome to it if it succeeds, right? So keeping that in mind, how much should founders ideally carve out in a pre-seed seed round for ESOPs and stock options?
Good question. I think where the market is today, that when you're raising your seed round or when you're raising your first round, I think typically 10% is what most VCs will ask you to do. That's the bare minimum. And quite frankly, anything lower than that is, I would say, from a candidate standpoint, it becomes a red flag, right? Like when you're interviewing at a company, you should ask them what's the size of your ESOP pool, and if a founder is carving out anything less than 10% to start with, I think that's a little bit of a red flag, which indicates that there is probably a lack of wealth sharing mindset in the founding team. Or so 10 is a bare minimum. And I think, but we've come across companies that are doing as high as 15, 18% even. So I think between 10 and 15% is a good range to be in for early stage companies, while they're carving out their pools. Yeah.
Got it. So keeping 10 to 15% number in mind and considering the fact that founders already have their hiring timeline in mind before they start fundraising, because a huge portion of their fundraising goes for hiring itself. Can you maybe help us understand that when they're thinking of CTC, how much should the CTC be cash versus stock options?
Yeah, I think this is a very subjective question, and it is very dependent on the whole stage of the company, how important this prospective individual would be to your company. Are they, what compensation were they at previously? What's their prior experience? Are they taking a pay cut to come into the company? Is the company pre-product? Is the company at PMF? All these factors sort of impact what would be the right sort of proportion, that the founder should kind of, or people should think of. If somebody is taking a large pay cut, let's say, and typically, early stage companies. Let's talk about early stage companies which are pre-product or pre-PMF. Obviously, you want to keep your cash burn as low as possible. You want to try and save your money for iterations and investing it towards the product. If someone is taking a pay cut coming in, and it is warranted that they will ask for a larger chunk in ESOP. So it's not uncommon or not sort of out of the ordinary if somebody wants 2x of their cash if taking a large pay cut and coming in, is at an absolute early stage in a pre-product stage. And quite frankly, if from a founder's perspective, if you're seeing someone who's obviously competent, that's why you're having these conversations, is agreeing to take a pay cut and is indexing or overweighting their comp on or asking for a large amount of ESOP, I think it kind of it tells you that this person is truly believing in your vision and mission. They want to be long term, and it's sending a signal that this person wants to build alongside with you. This person is not thinking short term. This person is thinking long term. So anybody who is really taking a pay cut and asking for more in ESOP is an absolute green signal or absolute great signal from a founder. So to answer your question, that what kind of proportions you should look for. So it could be like I said, 2x of comp, if or it could and if, like, let's say you've already reached some kind of product PMF, and you have team where you've got, then you might think, and depending on the seniority of the person, you might think of 1:1 on cash and ESOP. Or it could even be like depending on the role. And if it's somebody on the junior side of things, you might think of a percentage of the comp, maybe 10, 20, 30% of the comp. So it's very subjective. But I think the key determining factors would be, is the person taking a pay cut? What stage of company are you at? And what's the seniority of the person? I think these would be the key deciding factors.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense as well, right? Like, if a candidate is willing to take a pay cut, firstly, it's a very big green light for a company that they believe in not only just the founder, but then the overall vision that the founder is operating upon. And that's a question that we get asked pretty often, and that's like, that how much should be carved out for a co-founders level person or a CTO level person, right? So do you have any numbers in mind, right? Like if you're getting an external co-founder or a CXO in general, how much should you carve out for them?
Again, very subjective in terms of stage of the company and how long. I mean, is the company do they have a product? Are they pre-revenue? Are they have they kind of already had multiple rounds of funding in place? So and what is the current valuation of the company? So I think all these factors play a role. But in cases where there are like leadership, like or co-founder level people are being inducted into the founding team. It's not uncommon to have, depending on again stage, it could be if it's an absolute seed stage company, it could be as high, and and let's say a seed round has been, it could be anything between 5 and 10% of the company. If it's if the company is further ahead, further along, let's say Series B, Series C, 1%. All of those kind of numbers are the ones that we've heard being discussed and as well as kind of exchanged. But again, very subjective. But yes, it's if look, it's about skin in the game, right? If you're getting somebody who is um, senior, tenured, will be a functional expert, be able to push your product and your company along, and will be able to change the trajectory and change the axis or the slope at which your company is going, then absolutely it makes sense to align them and incentivize them in a way that would keep them long term happy in the company, right? I mean, owning 100% of a company worth 50 crores is worse than owning, like, let's say 50% of $1 billion company, right? Like, I think so the point I'm trying to make is that holding on to equity at the cost of growth is meaningless. It makes no sense. So share ESOPs if you found the right person. Share ESOPs. And ESOPs by design have a vesting schedule, right? Like if for whatever reason things are not working out, with a team member or an employee, it's always kind of, it vests over time, right? It's not that if it's been given away, it's given away, it's gone. No, it's not that. The person has to continue to add value to the company for them to for it to become anything meaningful for them as well.
But no, I'm very glad that you brought up the vesting period, brought a vesting period in the conversation. So what would be the ideal vesting period, for that founders should look at, considering the fact that they would want long-term people in the company and they would ideally want to reduce churn overall?
Great, a great question. I think I think 4 years is what is a pretty standard vesting schedule. A standard vesting schedule or a fair vesting schedule is 4 years, 25% each year. Is what I would say many companies offer, but we have seen companies that have a 5-year vesting schedule. We have seen companies that have a backloaded vesting schedule, which means that like, let's say, like a progressive vesting, which is like 10%, 20%, 30, 40, and so on and so forth. So we've seen all sorts, but I think something which is a 4-year vesting schedule at 25% seems like a fair fair vesting schedule to have.
Got it. And what about exercising periods, right? Should it be an infinite exercising period, or should it be like a limited, where maybe, say, the company buys back the stock options after an X number of years?
It's a great question. And the answer is, given the current legal or the context in India, so the way ESOPs work, and I'm sure you know this, is that you're due to pay tax at exercise, right? So you have to pay what is called perquisite tax when you exercise your ESOPs. Now, excess and perquisite tax is as per your income slab, and typically, like, these amounts will be in lakhs, and therefore, like, this person is likely to fall into the highest tax slab. So you're likely to be paying anything between 35 and 40% on taxes in when you exercise. So if we are to keep a limited exercise window, what happens is that the employees are forced to either exercise or let it lapse. Now, given that, like in many cases, these numbers, or the numbers in ESOPs could be in crores. The tax bill that somebody will have to pay if they are to exercise their ESOPs after having worked for an early stage company that has done reasonably well would be probably more than the person's net worth at that point, right? Like I said, right? Like somebody in their mid-30s or early 40s, will not only on salary will not have made that much money to even service the tax bill that might arise out of having to exercise their ESOPs if there was a finite window. Unless there's back-to-back liquidity coming in, then let's say they have a buyer, then of course, they'll be getting the money from one hand and then they can service their tax liability. But let's say you don't have a buyer immediately. Most people, I would say, most people would not be able to afford the tax liability. And given that there is no visibility on when there would be liquidity in the company. Fun fact is that IPO in India takes an average of 18 years, right? So how do you wait for that long for liquidity, right? So I think the answer, so that this is a long-winded answer to a short question that you asked, should you have a finite or an infinite exercise window? I think given in the Indian context, because tax is due at the time of exercise, it should be an infinite window. People should not have to, forego or let their ESOPs, which they have worked super hard for, lapse because of the way the regulatory context of our country is currently. So I think the right thing to do is have as long of an exercise window as possible.
Yeah, and I think that makes, and again, like I said, it makes a lot of sense considering the fact that a employer or candidate should only be exercising it when it's the right time for them, keeping the overall financial situation in mind, because tax is always a pain point for any and everyone, and this is an additional tax burden that someone might have to bear. But with that said, this brings me to my last question. Is there any advice that you might have for young founders?
I think the advice for young founders is, I count myself a young founder, but sure. The advice I think to any founder is that have generous ESOP pools, have really fair and pro-employee ESOP policies. Talent is the only thing that that will propel you to achieve your company's vision and mission, and getting the best talent is a function of being able to align their incentives towards the long term of your company. So have pro-employee ESOP policies, and I think that would be my my 2 cents to founders, or capable founders building in today's context.
Yeah, and again, I think that's an amazing way to end the conversation with. And like I said, thank you so much for taking the time out